My name's Nuto Haynes. I am your facilitator for the Vaccine Advisory Committee meetings. Before we start our meeting, I'm going to I asked a couple of folks to really open our meeting this morning. I want to also check in and see if Julie Johnson is here. And I apologize, I don't get an opportunity to see everybody on my screen, so I want to check in with folks, and I'm going to advance my screen real quick to see if everybody's here. Julie, are you here yet this morning? I don't see Julie. I will move forward, and what I wanted to do was give folks an opportunity, and maybe it's almost more for me as the facilitator than for all of you, but as many of us have watched the events at our nation's capital unfold over the last 24 hours or so. Yesterday when I was talking with our executive sponsors, we at OHA and for myself as the facilitator, we really wanted to give space this morning to kind of enter in and hold space for folks as we embark on the work that the Vaccine Advisory Committee is going to do. And so I just want to really give space for us to breathe this morning. For myself as the facilitator, I'm coming to you with a lot on my mind, as many of you are coming with a lot on your mind. And so what we wanted to do was give everybody an opportunity to take a breath. And for some of us, this might be leaning into the discomfort of quietness, maybe even leaning into the discomfort of our thoughts on where we are as a nation. And I would encourage folks to just stop for a second and just breathe. And so with that, I'm gonna just give everybody a chance to pause for a moment as we enter into the space this morning. If folks have something they would like to share with the group as a Vaccine Advisory Committee member, again, about the thoughts of where we're at, I would invite you to come into this space and share that with this group as well.
Well, I'm George Conway. I guess I'd say that I've worked in quite a few developing countries. I didn't expect to see this sort of thing here, but I'm relieved that the Republic still stands. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Conway.
This is Sandra McDonough, and I would add, I think we were all shocked yesterday and appalled by what happened, but when I read the New York Times this morning, I was catching up on all of that, but I also noted that yesterday was the deadliest day yet for the COVID outbreak in this country, and it makes the work of this committee more urgent.
Thank you, Sandra.
Hi, this is Marin with Interface Network. I'm just really, really sad. I feel the sadness for our country, and just, it's unbelievable how just things have unfolded. And I, as a person of color, as a Latino, it's just really sad. And it just hurts deep down in terms of just the events that unfolded and how people have reacted. And it just, anyway, just really, really, really sad. Thank you.
Thank you, Marin.
I'm Delisa Mishin-Tubby with Volunteers in Medicine Clinic in Springfield, Oregon. And for me, it just seems to be a distraction because the deadliest day of COVID and it to be superseded by such tragic events at the Capitol, you know, it just blows my mind to why things happen this way. But just to reiterate, I think it makes it that much more important for what we're doing here today.
Thank you, Delisa. Thank you so much, everyone, for just entering into the space with our breath, our quiet, and our thoughts. Again, my name's Nuto Haynes. I'm your facilitator for today and for subsequent VAC meetings. I want to, again, I see that Julie Johnson, our Director of Tribal Affairs to the Oregon Health Authority, has joined us. And I invited Julie to open our space this morning with thoughts and anything that she would like to open as a traditional opening. So Julie, I invite you to this space.
Thank you, Neil. Good morning, everyone. I introduce myself as a Paiute woman and mother, my first role, every day when I wake up. And I just want to say thank you so much for joining us today in this very important work. We know how COVID has impacted our tribal communities and our communities of color, and that this work is literally life or death. And so we just wanted to say welcome, good morning, thank you for being here. I think yesterday's events, you know, are definitely impactful, but it just goes to show our ongoing history through America that many of us have lived through and our ancestors have lived through. And so it just, you know, we have so much emotion and feelings and caring for our people. And I think that's why we're all here today, is to care for all of our Oregonians and to get us through this crisis that we've all been living in. And so I just wanted to take a few minutes to say that good morning and welcome. I also would like to thank our tribal leaders that are on the call today. We have 2 tribal representatives from our Oregon tribes, and Miss Sue Stewart is actually an elected tribal official for the Cow Creek Band of Umpqua Indians, and she has offered to do us a morning opening this morning. Thank you for that, Sue. And then I just have a few more words, but I would like to give Sue just a few minutes if that's okay.
So good morning, everybody. Beidou, good morning. I just wanted to offer just a few words to kind of set us off in a good way. So please just pray in your own way, and I hope that these words will touch you and help us set our intentions for what our work really is here today. So, Hapkianaz, we hum. Gayawitam iite. Gualayapa wihi. Tapoe te. Taka kiwine tihi. Hineake. Duuk. Hati duuk. And Creator, Father, we are all friends here. We help many people. Please let all prosper, let all shine, as long as this world goes on. It is good. We are all good. Everything is good. So just thank you for that opportunity. And again, I just want to echo what I've heard some other members say this morning. I am extremely saddened by what is going on in our nation's capital and what is going on in our world. I never expected that. And so I just hope we can just all concentrate on the work that we have to do today. This is, yesterday was the highest reported number of COVID cases, and that's the work that we need to impact here. So thank you so much for that. Thank you, Julie, and thank you, Jamil.
Thank you, Sue. And I just have one last piece I'd like to read. If you can just give me 1 second. This land we now call Oregon is the traditional homeland of the original Native people since time immemorial. Through 500 plus years of genocide, racism, and oppression, tribal members and their descendants are still here. We recognize their strength and resilience as the first people of this land. Historically, there were many tribal people who shared this land long before state borders and federal recognition. The state of Oregon honors the government-to-government relationship with the 9 federally recognized tribes. This includes the following sovereign nations: Burns Paiute Tribe, Confederated Tribes of the Kuzluamqua and Sayusla Indians, Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians, Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation, Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs, the Coquille Indian Tribe, and the Cow Creek Band of Umpqua Tribe of Indians, and Klamath Tribes. Recognizing this is the first step in acknowledging Oregon's true history and understanding the work that needs to be done moving forward. I apologize, I didn't think I'd get so emotional reading that this morning. I've personally been impacted by COVID. I've lost numerous loved ones to COVID. And I know many of you have all been impacted in a similar way. So again, I just want to welcome you, say thank you for this work. It is literally the most important thing right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Sue. Thank you, Miss Julie. Thank you so much for opening this space for us this morning. As I take my own breath and listen to my breath, I encourage you to do the same for yourselves throughout the morning, that we work together, that we share thoughts. Part of this work is not about a race, especially today. We do have a very full agenda. My intent as the facilitator today is really to create a space and invite us, have an inviting space for open and thoughtful connections and dialogue with you all, that you all may have that with one another, specifically around the future sequencing of vaccine distribution. Part of that is to give space for different forms of processing, and then while offering ideas of how we continue to move forward. What I'm going to do, Kristen, if you don't mind taking down the slides just yet. Thank you, I appreciate that. What we're gonna do as we enter into this space, I want to welcome you again. Again, my name is Nuto Haynes. I'm a public health consultant with OHA right now. As part of the work that I do, I get to interact with many colleagues. I worked for the Oregon Health Authority for 18 years, and about a year and a half ago, I left to do some other interests that I have had, and then also just start some other opportunities that have come my way. I often joke that it took a pandemic to bring me back to OHA at this point in my career, and so I'm happy to be here with my colleagues, again, working in such an important way. And so I am very honored and privileged to come and work with you all as the facilitator during this process. Part of some of my other side hustles as a good person of color, I have many side hustles. I teach as an adjunct instructor at the OHSU PSU School of Public Health. And so that's one of the things that I do. And so I come into this space really wanting to learn with you all, and then also offer different opportunities to come together and speak, and then also to think of different modalities that we can share in our conversations. For our introductions today, what I'm going to do is go ahead and go through the entire list of our vaccine advisory committee members, and then have some of our executive sponsors introduce themselves, and some OHA staff. I do want to let folks know real quick that this is a public meeting. We will be recording. We started recording already. We'll be recording this meeting. For all of the VAC members, you have the ability to unmute yourself, and please join in that fashion today when you're ready and able. And I would also ask that for those of you who are joining us as the general public, we welcome you. We also want you to know that in the chat, there's a link to where you can go and submit public comment or questions. And so there's a Survey Monkey in there. So for those of you who are not on the Vaccine Advisory Committee, I encourage you to go there to submit questions and comment. Again, as we open this space for introductions, I want to ask that folks go ahead and tell us your name, how you would like to be addressed, who is it that you're representing today, your pronouns, and really as we enter into the space, if you could give us one word as you set your intentions for today's meeting. I will start. Again, my name's Nuto Haynes. I am a public health consultant and your facilitator for today. My pronouns are she, her, and my word for today is discipline. So I would like to invite Sue to start.
Thank you, Jamil. Good morning. My name is Sue Stewart, and I prefer to be called Sue. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And my word for the day, I think, is wow. Wow may just be my word for today. Thank you.
Thank you. Suring Sherpa.
Hi, how are you doing? My word for the day is going to be perseverance. It's just something I'm trying to channel.
And Suring, can you share with us who you're representing? I want to acknowledge that not everybody was able to come to the meet and greet on Tuesday, and so we would love to hear who you're representing this morning. Thank you.
Sure. My name is Eileen Sherpa, and I am representing the Rosewood Initiative. We're a community-based nonprofit located in the outskirts of Southeast Portland, and we serve a diverse group of community members.
Great, thank you. Sean Baird.
Good morning. My name is Sean Baird. I use he, him pronouns. I am representing emergency medical services providers across Oregon. My day job is Vice President of Rural Services for the Metro West Ambulance group of companies.
Thank you,
And
Sean.
my word for the day is reflection.
Thank you. Sandra?
Good morning. I'm Sandra McDonough. I prefer to be called Sandy. And my pronouns are she, her, hers. And I work for Oregon Business and Industry, and I'm here today, I believe, to represent the Oregon private sector employer community and the employees across Oregon. And my word for today would be urgency.
Thank you. Dr. Qureshi?
Good morning. My name is Safina Qureshi. I am, my pronouns are she, her, hers. I am medical director for Columbia Pacific CCO and Care Oregon. I would say I represent a few sectors. Rural, because of Columbia Pacific CCO, rural Medicaid, I have an in-depth understanding of populations who have Medicaid in rural areas, and then also Medicaid population at large, and then also family medicine clinicians, primary care clinicians, especially those in community health centers serving underserved populations. My word for today would be, I was gonna say hope, but I'm gonna change to love. So maybe one of those two.
Thank you. Thank you. Ruth?
Good morning, Ruth Goliath, and I am the CEO with Leading Age Oregon. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. Leading Age Oregon is we're representing not-for-profit, mission-directed providers of quality housing and services to vulnerable older adults. My word for today, so many running through my head, I would have to say gratitude.
Thank you. Thank you, Ruth. Xenia, excuse me.
I'm assuming that's me.
Yes.
Okay. So I pronounce my name Zhenya.
Zhenya
Abruzzese, and I'm here to represent also kind of an intersection of several communities. I believe that I was invited to participate because of the role that we've played with the Slavic community, which is the second largest ethnic minority in Oregon, with Russian being the third most commonly spoken language in Oregon after English and Spanish. And it's a community that's been disproportionately affected by COVID. Also a community that's notoriously skeptical of vaccination efforts. So I think I'm here to serve as a bridge. I do a lot of work with Adventist Health Portland, which has built a program to serve the Slavic community. And we have had a lot of engagement with the faith community, which is the primarily, the largest part of the Slavic community here is faith-based. And so my role, I think, in this group would be to help think through some of the challenges and how to best overcome them for this particular group. But I think other minority groups share many of the same concerns. So I hope to be able to contribute more broadly.
Great. Thank you, Zhenya, pardon me. I want to say it properly. Do you have a word for today?
Yes, I think my word for today is the same as my word every day, which is action-oriented. I would like to see results.
Thank you. Kelly.
Kelly Gonzalez.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. It's nice to be with you. It's nice to be part of this important work and to be invited into this space. My name is Kelly Gonzalez. I'm a citizen of the Cherokee Nation. I'm also Mexican. Go by she, her pronouns. I am an associate professor and tenured at the OHSU PSU School of Public Health. I am also the first Native to be tenured in the School of Public Health and only Native working in the School of Public Health. I'm here today representing the urban Native community. I'm here also representing my children and my ancestors, and everything I do is rooted in my ancestors' survivance and wisdom. And I hope to bring that those tools of discernment and wisdom into this space. My word for today is decolonization.
Thank you, Kelly. Kristen?
Hello, my name is Kristen Milligan. I am the Executive Director of Community Volunteer Network. Community Volunteer Network is based in Southern Oregon, and we serve the older adult population both by providing volunteer opportunities and direct services. I oversee AmeriCorps senior volunteers that support our organization and our direct services that we provide, including non-emergency medical transportation. CVN is affiliated with Pacific Retirement Services that provides housing for the senior population, largely in Oregon, and also includes low-income housing for seniors.
Thank you.
Oh, and my word for today would be pensive.
Thank you. Lori Skoken?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Lori Skoken. I am an Executive Director of Human Research Protection for Providence Health and Services. That role is designed to protect the rights and welfare of all research participants. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and my word for today is compassion.
Thank you. Leslie?
Good morning. My name is Leslie Sutton. I'm with the Oregon Council on Developmental Disabilities. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And the Oregon Council on Developmental Disabilities works to ensure that Oregon systems and policies make it so Oregonians experiencing intellectual or developmental disabilities and their families have a welcoming place to call home here in Oregon. My word for today is, I think it's going to be center. That seems to be resonating. Thank you.
Thank you. Malika?
Good morning. My name is Malika. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I am Program Director of the Miracles Club. The Miracles Club is a community-based nonprofit that offers a range of services to the African American community. And my word for today is going to be resilience.
Thank you, Malika. Maria Loredo?
Hello, buenos dias. Good morning. How is everybody? My name is Maria Loredo. I like to go, I guess, by Maria. For I think it's simpler. I'm she, her pronoun. I'm here representing my community and the place that I'm at Virginia Garcia. I'm the CEO of Virginia Garcia Memorial Health Center, a federal qualified health center that in Washington County and Yamhill County. I am representing the migrant seasonal farm workers, essential workers, anybody that comes to our clinics, mainly the essential workers. And my word is hope that we can get something done so that all people get their vaccines. And hopefully we can do this in a way that serves them well. So I'm hoping that we can come up with something that can get to the people that really need it. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Maria. Marin?
Hi, good morning, everyone. This is Marin Ariola. Pronouns are he, him. I'm with Interface Network. We're a community-based organization. We work with diverse communities in the area of healthcare, workforce development, and economic development. We've been around for 33 years. We're also a community health partner with OHA. And I'm also part of the Governor's Racial Justice Council. And for me, the word today would be, I think somebody said compassion, but also trust. trust is really important. Thank you.
Thank you, Marin. Muriel?
Good morning. This is Muriel D. Laverne Brown. I am the Public Health Administrator in Crook County. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And I'm representing public health directors for a coalition of local health officials. I'm representing public health directors and administrators across the state of Oregon. And I had to think about this. My word for today would be inspiration.
Thank you. Muse?
Good morning. My name is Musa Olol. I'm the president of Somali American Council of Oregon, abbreviation SACO, the organization that primarily serves the East African community in general. We do advocacy as well as the service as well. This community is considered, according to Coalition Community Color and Portland State Studies, about 2/3 of the African in Maloma County. But statewide is about 25 to 31% of the Blacks in the state of Oregon. Language, third most spoken language of Portland Public School is also one of those languages. Somali is one of those languages. State of Oregon Secretary of State also added for the elections. So it's a huge population, but it's not visible because we still have the village to take care of each other. So you will never see one of us on the streets or any other words. That's why we had to open it to serve this community. My pronoun is he, him, his. I'm a 40-year resident of state of Oregon. What I see in my nation, it's very difficult to bear. It is against the very reason I became American citizen. I had a choice to be or not to be. Back in the 80s and 90s when I became one. The word that I have today, I will have to be similar to trust, because this community does not have a trust in any system comes from any form of government, and that's the very reason I joined this group, and I'm very humbled to be selected to be part of this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Muse. Nanette?
Yes, my name is Nanette B. Carter Joffrey, and I am here as a home care worker, represented by Service Employees International Union, Local 503, and the diverse membership, being a member leader within the Indigenous Peoples Caucus and the African American Caucus, as well as our Lavender Caucus, our Latinx Caucus, our Veterans Caucus, our Women of Color Caucus, and recognizing that our diversity is our strength. So my word for today as an individual worker here in Oregon is outrage.
Thank you, Nanette. Dr. Goldwau?
Good morning. My name is Dr. Eileen Goldwau. I use she, her pronouns, and I prefer to be called Dr. Goldwau. I'm here representing the Oregon Pacific Islander Coalition, where I provide data and epidemiologic support to the coalition. And my word for today is anti-racism. Thank you.
Thank you. Charity?
Hello, I'm Charity Bloom Miller. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am a registered nurse and have been in the medical field for 25 years. I am here representing the Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians and all of the 9 tribes of Oregon. I currently work for the Siletz Community Health Clinic as the Clinical Services Director, and have been primary to COVID response and COVID vaccine since the pandemic started. I think my word of the day was going to be focus, but after I heard it, I agree. I think it's urgency. We need to make some fast decisions so we can get this vaccine out to people quickly.
Thank you. Christine?
Good morning. My name is Christine Sanders. I am Director of Community Health Programs and Services with Rockwood CDC, which stands for Rockwood Community Development Corporation. I am she, her pronouns. I represent the Rockwood community on the east side of Portland and a lot of the East County. I'm here because my community, the African American community, have a long history of distrust, current and past. And so I want to be informed and factual to go back to my community to assist them in making decisions that are appropriate for them. On that note, my word for today and for the rest of the week is faith. Regardless of the hate that I feel towards us, I have faith that everything is meant to be for a reason.
Thank you, Christine. Daisy?
Hi everyone, good morning. My name is Daisy Bedoya Sotelo, pronouns she, hers, ella. I'm the organizing director at Begoon, and I'm representing farm workers and our Latinx working families. And my word, it's going to have to be growth. Thank you.
Growth, thank you. Deborah?
My name is Deborah Whitefoot. I'm the Executive Director of Inchiwana Housing. We are a up-and-coming 501c3. I'm here today to represent the indigenous people of the land living along the Columbia River Gorge. And as you know, Native Americans have had a sketchy relationship with trusting the federal government throughout history. And so today I'm here to represent that effort that's going on with the COVID vaccinations. And my word for today is compathy.
I'm sorry, Deborah, I caught everything but the last, your word of the day. My apologies. If you could say it one more time and then adjust your mic a little bit for me. Thank you.
Yes, compathy. My word for the day is compathy, and that means feelings, whether it be grief or happiness, shared with others, and that's my word for the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. Delisa?
Yes, my name's Delisa Mishintabi. I'm the Executive Director of Volunteers in Medicine Clinic in Springfield, and my pronoun is she, her. I represent the underserved, underinsured population in Lane County, and my word for today is tenacity.
Thank you, Delisa. Derek, Dr. Vivier?
This is Jamila.
Yes.
I believe he was not able to make it today.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for letting me know. Dolores?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dolores Martinez. I'm representing Uvalde. I'm the Director of Community Engagement, and I work a lot with the Hispanic Latino community, and pronounce she, her, ella. And my word for today is challenge.
Thank you, Dolores.
Thank you.
George, Dr. Conway, excuse me.
Thanks, No. George is fine. I'm a physician and epidemiologist. My current job is service director at Deschutes County Health Services, which is combined public health department and behavioral health department. My pronouns are he and him. I should say, I guess, that I'm representing our department, but I'm hoping that it's informed by a career-long interest in health equity. And my word for today would be reconciliation. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Rafael Kalani Raphael.
Hi, good morning. Dr. Kalani Raphael. I'm a physician, nephrologist. I take care of people with kidney disease, but I'm representing with Dr. Goldwau the Oregon Pacific Islander Coalition, which is a consortium of community-based organizations that support Pacific Islanders in Oregon and Southwest Washington. My pronouns are he, him. And my word for the day is kuleana, which means responsibility in Hawaiian. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Did I miss anyone? I would like to thank you so much for your words. And as you can see, we're in a lot of different places, which I can appreciate. I want to go ahead and give an opportunity for executive sponsors to introduce themselves. If Leanne, I saw you,
Yes,
if I can have you.
Thank you, Nu.
Please.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. My name is Leanne Johnson. I'm the Director of Equity and Inclusion for the Oregon Health Authority, she, her, hers. Also one of the 4 executive sponsors for the vaccine work. And my word for the day is care. We just have to learn how to care for all of us. And I care very much for all of you on this call today and this committee. Thank you so much. I'm humbled. I'm humbled.
Thank you, Leanne. And I see Rachel and then Pat. Please, Rachel.
Good morning, everybody. Rachel Banks. I use she, her, and hers. It's great to be here with you all in this challenging but hopeful morning. My prayer I represent Oregon Health Authority. I'm the Public Health Director. I also am a lifelong Black Oregonian. And my word and prayer for today is to listen.
Thank you, Rachel. Pat?
Yeah, thanks. Good morning, everyone. My name is Pat Allen. I'm the director of the Health Authority. My pronouns are he, him, his. My word for the day today would be transformation, I think. This Vaccine Advisory Committee and the way we're trying to approach this work really represent a shift for the agency as we now focus fully on eliminating health inequity in Oregon. We understand that we need to shift from a transactional relationship with communities to a transformational relationship that really core to our equity definition is allocation and reallocation of resources and power. And this committee is a really, really important piece of how we do that. The decisions that you make are going to be incredibly hard. We're going to ask you to do them incredibly quickly. But short of saying that we should do something illegal, which I don't think you'll do, we're going to go with your answers because you represent the communities most directly impacted by coronavirus. And so I really appreciate everyone's willingness to lean in. I think you've heard there were nearly 700 people who wanted to be here instead of you. So today I'll say congratulations. We'll see how that sticks over the course of the next month or so. But thank you very much as we work on this transformation.
Thank you, Pat. I also want to recognize, I'm not sure if they're on today, but our other executive sponsors that include Dr. Dana Haganari, and then also Dawn Jagger out of OHA as well. Were there others? I want to quickly recognize, ask a couple of OHA staffers that you'll be connecting with throughout today and throughout the entire time you're on the Vaccine Advisory Board, Vaccine Advisory Committee, so that you see names and you know who we're connecting with. Dr. Dean Seidlinger.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Dean Seidlinger. I'm a health officer and state epidemiologist. I use he, him, and his pronouns. Very happy to be here. I think I'll choose my word of the day to be hope for the work that this committee is doing and in general as we recover from yesterday.
Thank you. Dr. Shimi Sharif.
Hi everyone, my name is Shami Sharif. I am a physician and health advisor for the Oregon Health Authority and Department of Human Services as part of the COVID response. My word of the day is respect.
Thank you. I saw Kara Biddlecom.
Hi, this is Kara Biddlecom with the Oregon Health Authority. I use she, her, and her pronouns. I apologize if my camera's not working. And my word of the day would be intention.
Great, thank you. I also want to acknowledge that we have a lot of staff behind the scenes that we won't introduce today completely. I do want to say hi to Jamila, who will be helping me with just ensuring that you all get an opportunity to speak. Part of it is I can't see everything, and so we have lots of eyes working behind the scenes. So thank you for the Zoom squad that is assisting OHA staff today. Thank you so much. As we transition into our next piece, I do want to let folks know that we do plan to put a couple breaks, stretch breaks into the agenda. My apologies for missing that on the original agenda that was sent out earlier this week. And so we do have a couple breaks. Thank you again for just again putting in the work of just taking time to build some trust this morning. I know that some of us were not able to come on Tuesday night to just have a quick meet and greet, but this opportunity to see and hear from other members is so important to developing that trust that we need to have with one another as we work in transparency and as we move forward. And so what I want to do now is go ahead and shift into the agenda item of discussing the charge to this committee. Does that sound okay with folks? We're gonna go ahead and go right into it. Part of the thing that, as I was working with staff, over the course of the last couple of weeks, as the facilitator, it made me think about some of the things that, how are we going to ground ourselves in this work? How are we going to, what's the charge? And it made me really ponder, what did I get myself into? And then also thinking, how do we do this together? And I want to share a couple thoughts. I know that some of you as visual learners, just to help kind of drive the picture that I have in my head. Let me share my screen real quick here. Yeah. So when we were talking as a group with the executive committee, executive sponsors and staff, we were really trying to wrap our heads on where we were going. And part of that direction, just we landed in this really funny and interesting spot as we so do in working together. We were wrapping up a conversation and one of our staff person said, we'll just all get together and, get in our hot rod and go to Denver. It's just that simple. This is what the process looks like. And we all had a very good chuckle about that. And I was thinking, a road trip to Denver? One, I've never been to Denver outside of the airport. And how do we get to Denver as a group? And it made me think a lot about how we can visualize this work that we're entering into as a committee of 28, excuse me. And it made me think about family road trips to the Oregon coast and throughout the coast. My family were refugees in the 70s. And so it made me think about my family of 7 and how we would cram into my dad's VW wagon, which he was very proud of, and we would make this journey. And so if we think about that journey, my journey thinking about families, at times we had maps in our glove compartments. Sometimes we had 2 or 3. So we had plans. Sometimes these maps weren't even of the state that we were actually living in. Why, I don't know. And yet we would get into the car and go. Part of this included things that we knew would happen. A few of us fought over the maps, like, what's the plan? I can read the map, or you can read the map. A few of us thought about even, you know, when we were fed up with the map, we'd pass it to the next child to read the map. And part of that really came with thinking about, you know, I was kind of done looking at the map as well. Part of this road trip that we're taking to Denver is really about that there is inevitably some circling. Have you ever been in a road trip with your family where it's like, oh, I think we passed that already, Dad. I think we passed that already, Mom. So that going back and forth in the same spot. We also need to stop for gas and refuel during our trip, right? And then a lot of the time, that favorite thing that you wish wouldn't happen, you had to pull over and stop in a parking lot and figure out, where the heck are we? I think some things eventually, we would stop, take the occasional lookout point and viewpoint and see where we were going. But inevitably, we would really stop and kind of mark where we're going, what we wanted to do, and look at that destination as, the end point. So with that, I say to this group, the charge of the group would be our end destination of getting on this road trip, cramped, however it may be, not always pretty, and could be a lot of work in between. So in thinking about that, I would also say this is the crampedness, this is the joy, if you will, of coming together in working towards getting to a destination. Sometimes you may have the breakdown, such as the case in the picture on the right, the breakdown of the car, and yet everybody is still together somehow making it through to the end journey. And I hope that our end journey would land somewhere beautiful. And yet I'm okay with this too, as the end journey of where we're getting. Let me go ahead and close that.
No?
Yes, please.
Oh, sorry, you're no longer sharing your screen. It's all good.
I want to pause a moment and ask folks, as part of that journey, that was just kind of me visualizing really quick what this process may or may not look like for us as we do this work. Would folks like to think about this road trip that we're going on? Our end destination may look really different from where we start. And I would ask that, part of the charge of this committee is really about the task of co-creation of sequencing of the rollout for phasing 1B and 1C. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit, but I wanted to just stop and ask folks on the VAC committee, about what their concerns are or what has bubbled up for them, clarifications about the scope of what we're doing here.
I think I am always okay with road trips in whatever destination. The only concern I have is as we switch and navigate various drivers, with you being our compass, having a respectful boundary for heated conversations or rabbit trails or tangents, because as we've all been in those in meetings, it tends to consume a lot of time and take up away from the focus and the cause. So my hope and expectation as our brilliant navigator is to be able to navigate that respectfully, but for everyone to understand that it is not a personal, but we're here for a goal. We have to leave all of that other stuff somewhere else. So that's what I'm looking for, to be focused, as someone says, as this is crucial, and to just get straight to the point of why we're here.
Great. Thank you, Christine. I appreciate you opening up with that comment. I appreciate that. And I want to also interject that I would decline the offer of being a compass. I am really here merely as a vessel to keep us moving. The vessel and compass is really all of you, and I would want to kind of give that back to you all. And in talking with the executive sponsors and knowing their heart and head work that has gone into this, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, and they'll be able to share a little bit more about where they've landed, is that we want to do things differently. In the past, OHA has not been the leader in working with communities. You know, as much as we want to say we have not done that, and we have not done that well. And that not only the acknowledgement of that, but how are we going to reverse that? You know, how are we going to reverse the work that we haven't done, right? And so part of that is really opening up this space for all of you to come together and put those ideas and actions into place for our communities.
I knew this.
Yes.
You know, for me, through this journey, what I want is transparency, honesty, to build trust. And I think if we do that, we'll be more effective in accomplishing our goals.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to find out about the time frame. How long is our road trip? We're coming together. We're doing this work. Yet, tribes that have got the vaccine through IHS, they're already vaccinating, their members and stuff. So, when do we need to make a decision, and what is our, how soon can we get there?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Charity. My understanding of the charge to this group, we will be meeting after this meeting today. We have planned meetings for Thursdays, 10 to 12. And so we will have weekly meetings, and it is not, it's not set in stone that that's the only time we meet. So if this group decides that that is just not enough time, we're trying to, build rapid rapport with one another, gain trust, and all of that in a matter of a few weeks, that may not happen as fast as we want. And so this group can decide to have additional meetings, and we can discuss that further a little later in our process and our governance of how we want to do this work. And so we are looking at 2-hour meetings once a week with the option for additional meetings as this group sees fit.
Yeah, that was my thought. I'm sorry, somebody. I know that we are going to have 2 hours for the next month, but there's so many of us and so many things to do and we want to do it fast. So I'm wondering, and I think that the team would decide whether we need more time and more meeting, just because it is crucial that we get to something sooner. And,
yes.
And weekly is not going to be enough. At least that's my thought. So just the feeling that there's a lot to do and not a lot of time.
Yes, thank you, Maria.
Mm-hmm.
And we are capturing all of this information too, so thank you for that. Would others like to address that particular piece of additional meetings, thoughts on that?
Well, this is Zhenya. I have a question. Can somebody summarize in 2 or 3 sentences what's the charter of the group? What does success look like? What it is that they're aiming for?
Thank you, Zhenya. Based on what I described, would somebody like to to do that, or I'll even have Kara Biddlecom, our Deputy Director, answer that.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So really the charge to this group, and I know we're going to spend a little bit more time getting into the details in your charter draft today, but what we need to focus on over the next 5 weeks is determining the sequencing for COVID-19 vaccine for phases 1B, 1C, and 2. And we'll talk through what that might mean. And we understand too that there are going to be other things that come up that are really important related to COVID-19 vaccine that we'll want to document and work on, probably outside of this meeting. So really the charge is to develop those sequencing plans for the next phases until we have enough vaccine for everyone who would like it.
So Kara, does that mean no more vaccines are going to be pushed out for the next 5 weeks until this group makes a decision?
No, we are in the process of administering vaccines in Group 1A, and we'll talk through what that is going to look like so that as Oregon receives more vaccine over time and we can vaccinate more people, this group is charged with identifying what order essentially of groups will occur over the next couple of months.
Is part of the charter of this group to deal with vaccine hesitancy in certain populations, or is it strictly sequencing of priority groups?
So this is Kara again. We're trying to focus first on sequencing of priority groups. Vaccine hesitancy, communications, data, operations, how we reach communities are all really important pieces of this work overall. That I think we're going to identify those things as we talk, and we are going to need to identify how we work on them collaboratively, likely outside of these meetings, just due to the time that we have together. And we can talk a little bit more today too about some of the kind of simultaneous community engagement efforts that are happening and communications efforts that are happening, and how all of the wisdom that you bring to bear will feed into that work as well.
This is Leanne Johnson, one of the executive sponsors, and I would like to amplify that a bit, that we need to bring our whole selves to this conversation. And it's difficult to compartmentalize who we are in terms of our identity and our lived experience. So I would very much appreciate all that comes with you in terms of your lived experiences as members of this committee. And I would encourage us not to compartmentalize what those concerns might be, including vaccine hesitancy and conversations along the way. So I just want to make sure that we have the opportunity to bring who we are, hear your concerns, and at the outset of this, in our conversation whenever we did our previous meeting, our meet and greet, one of my interests is what are the unintended consequences as well as we're moving this forward. I think all of that needs to come to bear in these conversations. So I just want to bring that in as an interest that I have in terms of understanding what is going on and how do we address that. And the wisdom of this group I am seeing as a very unique opportunity for us to have these conversations in a very different way.
This is Lori. Leanne, I thank you a lot for saying that. I know that the charge of this committee is not necessarily to address distribution and things like that, but I think that they all sort of come together, and those kinds of issues need to inform the sequencing to a certain extent. So I really appreciate that more general approach of bringing it all rather than just focusing on a specific thing.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Kelly. I'd like to also add my appreciation, Leanne, for your encouragement that we bring our entire selves to this space. That feels good for me, and I appreciate that. I do also want to just name that I do hear a potential point of tension from what I just heard between you and Kara, and I'd like to just get a little bit more clarity around that. I heard from Kara that we would be discussing these more complex issues around historical and contemporary mistrust and hesitancy related to vaccine receipt and uptake outside of these Thursday meetings. But then I also heard, Leanne, that you would encourage us to bring our whole selves and not compartmentalize that at this meeting. I just want to make sure that we have some parameters and understanding around that, and particularly because I want to make sure that I'm not harming others in this work, and that I'm also protecting myself in this work, and that if we are going to be talking about those other complex issues, then I would like to know where it's going to be received the best. Thank you.
And Leanne and Kara, this is Christine. I went through two intense emotions in 3 minutes between the two of you. My heart sunk when I heard what you said, Kara, because I do agree about being focused, but I'm also a Black female, and my community is everything to me, and they're trusting me to give them accurate information. And then I heard Leanne said, Christine, be who you are. That's why we asked you to this committee. And being who you are has been an African American, and we do have historical concerns. And I want to be able to discuss that in these decision making. So as Kelly has adequately said, I am feeling conflicted because I'm not sure exactly what OHA is saying in regards to how we present ourselves. I can do either or, but I'm now confused on which one you're wanting.
This is Rachel, and I'll jump in and just say thank you all for that and for surfacing the tension, right, of doing this sort of work in an expedited timeline, and also doing the work in a quality way that addresses the historical and the past inequities that also have to do with trying to rush something through. And so surfacing that, and to someone's comment earlier around being transparent, that's one of the things that we have to be transparent about. I think one of the ways that I think about it is that we know that we do ultimately want to get to a sequencing, for the next phase of the vaccine. And we also, in order to meet our overall goal, and I have some slides later where we'll go into some of the other mechanisms on how we're looking at this vaccine distribution more broadly. But we know that we have to be able to reach communities that are most impacted, and ultimately our goal in OHA is to end health inequities in 10 years. This is a perfect opportunity to do that. So I think what it'll take of us is, in this road trip, to identify all of the things that we need to identify, meaning bringing your whole selves to this space. And I think there's going to be times where we have to maybe plan a side trip to do a deeper dive. So I think this is a bit of the both and of ultimately we want to get to the sequencing, but we know that that's not good enough. It's necessary, but it's not sufficient for us to ultimately reach our goals. And so we have a community engagement team and a health information team, and there are other folks at OHA that are working on some of these issues too. So we want to in some ways have I'm terrible at analogies, so if this doesn't work, forgive me, but like off ramps into other places. So it's not like, oh, we'll deal with that outside the meeting, but we want to have a place to actually implement and some of the strategies as well. So that's, I think, a bit of how, I think about it, of that, yes, absolutely bring your whole selves. And there are times where we may have to say, that is a really good issue. We're going to need to gather, either more people or have, some other conversations, which you all would be invited to, of course. And we want to make sure that there's enough and the right people to address those issues as well.
Thank you, Rachel. I like what you say about both and. and the potential of side trips and the raising of the tension. Thank you for raising the tension as well to the members that brought that forward, because this is the conversation. I heard a dear colleague yesterday say, what gets in the way of the work is the work. And so I think that we've got to take those side trips or stop the car. I want to get out. We need to talk. And I think it's all of the above. I can't personally, I can't do the work in equity and inclusion without bringing myself, because it's a so very personal and deep issue to me. And this is not this conversation and what each of us as people who work for each other bringing forward is we're bringing it forward in our lived experience, right? And that's going to be at times different reflections and different perspectives. And so to bring that forward, to have the conversation, to work through it, that is an absolute necessity in this work. So hey, wait a minute, thank you. I appreciate that very much.
Thank you, Leanne. Is this a good time for folks to talk about some kind of guiding group of agreements? I hear a lot of different things. Perhaps it could be also a good time to take our first break. So there's a couple ways we can go as far as we've been gathered for over an hour now, and so I am going to honor 2 breaks for folks. Would folks care for a 10-minute stretch and bio break? Is this a good time? Or yes.
Yes, and I'm sorry, I wanted to just chime in really quickly. I've been trying to address your initial question, Nutu, and I guess my expectation that I wanted to share is that, and I know that later we're going to discuss, where we are today. So I'm hopeful that that's where we'll end that I'll get the information I'm seeking. But my expectation is that we will understand as a group and have the same information on where we've already driven, so that we can be informed on where we're going forward. So I'm still wanting a lot more information on what's happened with the existing vaccine supply. And I'm really hopeful for the next phase, and that what the existing challenges are, so that we aren't driving blind to Denver.
Yes. Thank you, Kristen. I appreciate that so much. And yes, this meeting will definitely, our hope is that it helps ground you in the road that we're taking, bumps and all, and even showing us where we've already passed. We've passed a marker, right? And so what I'm going to go ahead and suggest is that we take a 10-minute break and return at 10:25. And so you can turn off your cameras and turn off your volume, your mute button, but please do not leave the meeting, because you'll have to come back into the meeting. So I hope you got a chance to move a little bit and grab some nutrition if needed. I wanted to kind of start this next piece kind of quickly going back, and we don't have to do it quickly either, quickly going back to just our last conversation that we had as a group, just acknowledging the tensions, right? So the tension, the push and pull of working under a really tight timeline while giving space to the intentionality of the work that we can't really rush. And yet we're on a road trip, and yet we're trying to get there by a certain time. And so just recognizing that push and pull tension, I think, is important as we start off the foundation and the groundwork for today and the work that lies ahead of us. Part of that is also, as many of you had said, what are my parameters? What is it that I'm working, what are the for lack of a better word, walls in which I am asked to stay within, right? But then also pushing through those walls, right? We don't have to have walls even. And so again, thinking about that piece of what the work is, and then thinking about working with a lens of equity that is not rooted in a transactional way. I think that was mentioned earlier this morning by some of our executive sponsors as well. Yes, please.
Yes, thank you. On this, and on this last one, I probably would reword this just a bit.
Please.
To say that we're working with a framework of equity that is rooted in a transformational way.
Thank you.
flipping that a little bit to move us forward might be helpful. Thank you. Thank you for, yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
Can
thank
you
you.
repeat that one more time, Leanne? I like that.
You're muted. I mute myself. Yes, I know. Thank you. Working with a framework of equity that is rooted in a transformational way, because we're moving towards we're doing an affirmative instead of a not. We're doing this is what we are doing.
Correct.
So
Thank you.
The framework of equity that is rooted in a transformational way. Thank
Great.
you.
No, thank you. Thank you so much for that. We'll make those changes.
Perfect.
Also,
go ahead, Jamila.
I'd like to also acknowledge Sandy's comment or question. Will we address the question that was raised about what has happened with vaccine distribution so far?
Yes, we will be jumping into that in just a bit here, Sandy. Thank you. And then really quickly touch base on some of the things that were brought up in just before the break, just thinking about kind of that guiding group agreement of one, engaging with curiosity. We want you to bring yourself to the work. Again, back to what Leanne had shared. One of the things that executive sponsored had always encouraged me is we expect you and want you to bring your best, yourself to the work. And that stayed with me as a quiet, shy refugee kid living in Southern Oregon. That has not always been the space in which I work. And it's a transformation in my mind. It was actually very freeing to think that whatever that looks like for me, I can bring that. And so going back to some of the words that Leanne were sharing about, we expect you and encourage you to come to this space, and yet we also want to create a space where that can happen as well. And then that third piece of the guiding group agreements really is the step back and step up. That is really just part of that place where we talk about our privilege and who we are, knowing that sometimes we need to step back in order that others step forward in the conversation, so that we give and share the space of what we want to say. And so would folks want to add anything and bring up anything as far as additional guiding group agreements? I see that Leslie, you have your hand raised. Please.
Yes, thank you. I really appreciate the focus on equity. However, I feel like we need to also acknowledge that equity is a focus on doing things in a way that meets the needs of people. And traditional healthcare has been meeting the needs of systems and has been ignoring the needs of people. And so with that, I would, I don't know if we need to add it as a group agreement, but I would just encourage group members to come today, and when you hear from each other, to lead with yes and instead of no but in your comments. And I think that that's important, so we can try to start thinking differently, because to do this work, we need to think differently. And I think keeping an open door and understanding what each of us is saying is really important to start changing the conversations. I know we've got members on this group that represent stakeholders and people, and we have members on this group that represent systems. And that's why I make this comment that sometimes we come forward with things that we're saying people need, and then sometimes we hear from systems why that can't happen. And I would encourage us to come from a place of yes, and let's consider how we can make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leslie. And yes, we can totally add this to the guiding group agreements. And I have that lead with a yes and I thank you for those words. Would folks like to add additional guiding group agreements or have comments?
Hi, this is Marin.
Please.
I would echo what Leslie said, and also that I think people of color carry a lot of trauma with the health system or for a long period of their lives, and that trauma builds up and then anxiety. And I think in terms of really focus on making sure that whatever we develop really values every human being in a way that they feel respected and valued. Because many times, like I said, systems are created in a way that they totally disconnect from reality of working with people. And for me, it's really important that we deal with that trauma and making people feel not discounted, but valued, respected, that we value their lives, their health. And I think making sure that we, as we go through the work, that always in our minds to make sure that we stick with that as a value. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marin. Others?
Hi, I'd like to offer a couple of ideas as well. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you to all who have shared so far. I would like to also offer that we are grounding or rooting our ideas around equity, where I guess two things. Developing some kind of a practice in our engagement where we can acknowledge and uphold those tools of transparency, that when we are speaking about equity, are we centering that equity in community and community experience, and meeting the needs of community in an authentic way? Or are we centering that equity on the systems and status quo and the same old, same old? I think it's important that we acknowledge when we're doing equity different beyond a checkbox approach, to build our capacity as we transform in this work to then transform the work. I would also like to acknowledge that transformation is also anchored in decolonizing, and that we acknowledge colonialism and settler colonialism as a determinant of health. And in doing so, the equity then would be countering systemic violence towards Indigenous people, the first peoples of these lands. And in doing so, we enact an equity that brings Native people to the contemporary, because colonialism always situates, and settler colonialism always situates Native people in the past. And so it's important that we are acknowledged as a thriving people here today, as a group that has overcome many apocalypses, including genocide, attempted genocide. We have a lot to contribute, and we have a lot to offer to guide us forward into a future for that transformative justice that we're talking about, and I think that we're desiring.
Thank you so much, Kelly.
This is Zhenya. I wanted to offer a thought. It dovetails with the earlier discussion that we had. It would be helpful if we could either agree or decide where we stand on the basic statements, which is that we desire that one of the key goals of this group, now people could have different individual beliefs, but as a group, our key position is that the vaccine is a favorable public health initiative that will improve the health of vulnerable populations. And therefore, the goal of this group is to make sure that the most impacted and vulnerable subgroups within the population receive the vaccine in a timely fashion. I think it may be very interesting for me to see if this group agrees on these two statements, because if so, then this would imply that our goal is to ensure not just the fair sequencing and priority, but also the uptake by the community, because you don't serve the goal of having the most vulnerable members being protected if the vaccine is simply available to them, but they don't receive it. So that's kind of my question. Do we have a firm agreement, as would be self-evident, but that vaccine for the purposes of this group is a favorable initiative that we are here to promote, and two, that our goal is not merely to make it available in the equitable priority fashion, but actually uptaken in that manner.
Thank you, Zhenya. Are you asking that the group decide that now, or is that, would you like to, how is that landing? I just want to make sure I understand what's being posed to the VAC.
Yeah, well, part of my comment is informed of working with several members of this group in the racial equity committee, and there were a lot of conversations that, you know, traditional healthcare, the healthcare that health institutions offer is not always what the communities want. And I wanted to be very intellectually crisp for the purposes of this group, whether we can set those conversations aside and start this group with the notion that we have a base level agreement that the vaccine is safe, effective, and a recommended treatment. And therefore, the goal of this group is to take it one step further and strategize how to appropriately prioritize not just the delivery, but the uptake of the vaccine, because that's the ultimate goal, right, is to uptake, not to offer it, but to receive it. But if we have disagreements whether the vaccine is even appropriate, I think we need to put this on the table, because other groups that I've been part of, there have been a lot of discussions about, well, what the tradition, you know, what medicine says is right isn't what the communities think is right. And I think this, if we start there, the work of the group starts looking very different. So I wanted to ask, do we have a base level agreement that by the nature of being in this group, we have agreed that the vaccine is something we're willing to put our credibility behind and promote it to communities? And now it's the question is in what priority and how to overcome the resistance? Or are we one step before that in debating whether or not we should be, in certain instances, even promoting?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that clarification. So what I hear that Zhenya has proposed is we kind of get a quick pulse from all of you on the VAC to determine whether, yes, we are in agreement that vaccine uptake and use for our communities is something that we will, I don't want to say strive or push, but please, Zhenya, is that what I'm hearing? That we're going to go, we would like to get a pulse on that? Is that okay with folks? We have one way to do that I would like to suggest. It's a consensus-based model of how we would agree to approach this question that Zhenya has put out. Basically, it's called Fist to 5. If any of you have used it, it's a kind of a quick way for us to get a pulse on where we're at as a group. And as you can imagine, a group of 28 folks, it may be difficult to kind of go through that long list, but this is kind of a quick pulse. If you are in agreement that yes, vaccine, we as a group would agree that vaccine is a good, Zhenya, if you could help me out, just a briefer version. I want to make sure I get your words and not my own, how I'm translating in my head. So please, one more time.
Well, I don't know that I can reproduce it, but I think we all know what we're talking about.
Okay.
Are we able to start from the baseline that we as a group endorse the promotion of vaccine as a public health initiative? This is our baseline foundation from which we work.
So 5, a full hand would be, I love it, yes. 4 is sounds good. 3 is I'm okay with it. 2 is I have reservations, but I need to be convinced. 1 is, hold on, we need to talk about this. And a fist is no way. Okay, so I put that up on the screen just kind of to help us get a feel. And so on the count of 3, let me do this real quick. I would also say that if folks have any type of reservations or need to be convinced, if they're holding up a 2 anything less than a 3, we would give space and time to discuss. And so, yes.
I would also add, for the purposes of accommodation, that if people need to put any of that in the chat, they can do so.
Thank you.
Thank
Yes,
you.
please.
No, there's a question asking for clarity. Are we being asked if we should include addressing vaccine hesitancy in this work? And Kelly echoes that it wasn't quite clear if that's the ask or if it's something else. I guess it's not clear the exact ask of the group. Zhenya, would you say that's kind of what you're asking, to include not just prioritization and sequencing, but also addressing vaccine hesitancy in community?
I think it's the overarching issue we're dealing with, but before we can solve it, I think we need to agree whether members of this group who were selected all agree on the baseline statement that we, not necessarily our communities, but we as representative of our communities, fundamentally are endorsing the use of this vaccine or the vaccines that are coming out. And our goal is to find ways to equitably promote its use. That is the question. Are we all in agreement that vaccines are, this particular vaccine or vaccines that are coming out are we endorsing them?
Thank you, Zhenya. And I thank you for that comment, because I don't want all of us to enter into the assumption that because we're on this vaccine, we are all in the same place and in agreement with that. So thank you for that. Do folks feel fairly confident that they could offer a hand or a number of sorts based on our consensus model here?
I have a question. This is Nanette speaking.
Please.
Before we go forward, I think I understand the questions being asked of us, but I want to make sure that we are talking about the fact that this is only an emergency approved vaccination. It's still, in my mind, not the finalized version of a vaccine that would be 100% issued to the whole population.
I could answer that question. So the vaccine itself, if it's going to be approved, will be in the current form. The only thing is that right now it's still considered investigational. It's only undergone emergency authorization, but not full approval. So full approval will require 6 additional months of FDA review and regulation before it can get to that. But if it's going to be approved in 6 months, it would still be in the form that it's being delivered to patients now.
Thank you, Shimi. Is that helpful, Nanette? I also.
Yes, so then this question is just to address the distribution, not the distribution, the support of it being distributed as identified to the CDC for its use immediately. How we feel about the immediate distribution of it. Because we're still 6 months down the road before we know what vaccine will be utilized for the entire US population. Am I correct?
That's not what I heard. I heard the vaccines that are available today are the final formulations, but the final approval won't happen for a few more months.
That's correct. So the final approval will take additional 6 months. The reason it's not fully approved is usually these processes take anywhere from 18 to 24 months. These vaccines that we have right now available for the public have only undergone about 9 months of evaluation. The additional work that will happen in 6 months is ongoing safety and evaluation of these vaccines, which we're actually starting to get even with clinical use. So what they do is they actually follow the 43,000 plus participants that were in the original trials for ongoing safety and efficacy. So for example, like the 94 to 95% efficacy could change with longitudinal data looking at, how they may or may not be exposed and get COVID-19 in the course of additional months of monitoring. And then the other thing is they'll also continue to monitor for safety and side effects, such as with allergic reactions, reactions at the site where the vaccine was administered, all of the above.
Yeah, this is Rachel. I in this conversation here, a couple of questions actually. I hear the question around vaccine hesitancy and to what extent is that or is that not in the scope of this group, which has come out in some waves throughout the conversation in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
And then I hear a question that's more personally geared towards are folks comfortable in their role in this vaccine advisory group, saying that they support the distribution of vaccines. And I almost wonder if we don't flip those two things. I think we're starting from the second piece, and then it's raising a lot of questions that ultimately I think it'd be good for people to hear some of these, which I know we'll get to. But I wonder if we're going to do this, if it would help to start with, is vaccine hesitancy part of the scope? And then if it is, I think that the following conversation and people's fist to five along that will help us in thinking through how we might address vaccine hesitancy in communities, because some of the same questions that folks have here will be some of the same questions that communities are having as well.
Yeah, thank you for that, Rachel. Thank you for helping me process that. I also wonder if part of this work is really to ground folks, and perhaps this might be a pause before we actually do any type of fist to five voting, would be to offer more information before we get to that place. And so if it's all right with folks, I'm thinking we continue with actually getting some more information to you, in the sense of some of the presentations that we were going to offer you in this next hour, so that you can, again, have a little more grounding of where we're at, where we've been. And then if we can come back to Xenia's proposed statement and see if we don't have a little more information that would help us get to a point where we feel comfortable even offering up a time to vote. How does that sound and sit with folks?
I really appreciate you saying that, because it felt like there was an assumption that we all had the same information.
Correct.
And have the same understanding, and we don't. I would have voted no way, because I don't have the information. I felt immediately better just hearing Dr. Shimi give me an explanation of what that 6 months looked like, because I wasn't even aware of that. So I rather know more before I can say anything.
Great.
For myself and for my community.
Thank you, Christine. So I'm going to go ahead, and I know many of you probably have other comments. I'm going to actually go ahead and, with your permission, go ahead and let's move forward and hold on to Xenia's proposed question and address that in just a bit. So let's get you some more information so that you feel a little more grounded in what the picture of Oregon looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and take off my screen and then have Rachel and Dr. Shimi Sharif on deck to share where we're at with the picture of sequencing. One of the things that we wanted to share with you is, again, give you a glimpse of Oregon Phase 1A sequencing, so you know what the sequencing factors were. So I'm going to turn it over to both Rachel and Dr. Shimi Sharif.
Great, thank you. And if someone could pull up the slides, that would be fabulous. And I'll kind of, while we're doing that, just say that initially, as we were talking about presenting information, and even before I go into what the sequencing is, want to really undergird that with the why. So the why in this is really, if we can actually go back to the health equity definition, which is slide 6 or so. I just totally made that up. Oh yeah, it is. So this is really, and this has been adopted by the Oregon Health Policy Board, but the definition of health equity is where we started. in our sequencing. And I'm going to go ahead and read it, which I don't always do off of slides because I think each and every word is important, and there have been people who spent a lot of time getting all of these words right. But Oregon will have established a health system that creates health equity when all people can reach their full health potential and well-being, and are not disadvantaged by their race, ethnicity, language, disability, gender identity, sexual orientation, social class, or any intersection among these communities or identities or other socially determined circumstances. This really means that achieving health equity requires an ongoing collaborations of all regions throughout our state and sectors of the state, including tribal governments, to address the equitable distribution and redistribution of resources and power, and also the recognizing, reconciling, and rectifying historical and contemporary injustices. So just really, I've been very pleased that as folks' comments have talked about really the need to do this thing, that's what a health equity conversation in practice really looks like. So as we began having conversations about the sequencing, and ultimately the Centers for Disease Control early on put out a recommendation of sequencing that had phases 1, 2, and 3. And phase 1 was broken down into phase 1A, phase 1B, and C, and 2. And right now we are currently, and we can go to this slide, we are currently distributing vaccine to 1A. And the Centers for Disease Control's recommendation for 1A was starting with healthcare personnel. So what we did at OHA is had a conversation about what does healthcare personnel mean? And we really wanted to have a broad definition of healthcare personnel. We wanted to make sure that that was anybody working in a healthcare setting. That could include licensed professionals, that could include people who are making and delivering food, that includes environmental services, that includes anybody in that setting. So we wanted to be broad there. We wanted to make sure that it includes healthcare interpreters, that it includes traditional health workers, that it includes home health workers, and also people who are supporting our communities with intellectual, developmental, or other physical disabilities that are going to multiple different sites. This clearly also includes for us our elders and other people in long-term care facilities and our community members that are taking care and serving them. So we do have that broad definition of healthcare workers, and right now we have been vaccinating healthcare workers and those folks working in long-term care. If we can go to the next slide, I can talk more about the groups. But so what we wanted to make sure that in phase 1A, a number of things were taken into consideration. One is access to the vaccine for those who wanted to be vaccinated. The other is that informed consent takes place. And this is that this vaccine is voluntary, that people understand what the vaccine is, they understand their rights in taking it and their rights in not taking it. And that informed consent clearly is in a way that people can understand, which gets to linguistically and culturally responsive care throughout the COVID-19 vaccine. So those are, once again, the underpinnings of what we want to see happening in that phase 1A distribution. Next slide, please. So, you know, this once again is really critical as we are achieving an OHA, as has said before, our overall strategic goal, which is to eliminate health inequities in 10 years. And in order to do that, we have to understand the current and historical injustices, as we've said. And we can go to the next slide. And as you all have continued to raise, and that will come up as we have a conversation of access and uptake. And in order for us to really ultimately achieve the uptake, we need to understand people's experiences with vaccines and the health system in general and government as well. So I think I talked through most of this. I guess I would add a couple of things. By healthcare personnel, we mean folks who are paid or unpaid. This could include volunteers. It does include students, and it includes all sorts of traditional healthcare workers. You can see on this slide, there's some examples of, you know, peers peer support workers, personal health navigators, doulas, and really the broad range of healthcare personnel. Next slide. So after we do group 1A, so just to be clear and go back to people's questions, we are vaccinating group 1A. Initially, vaccines went out to hospitals. That was in the first wave. Some of that had to do with the initial vaccine that came out needed to be stored in ultra cold storage, way colder than a regular freezer. And so we were looking at what are the sites that can accommodate that ultra cold storage, and what are the sites who have staffing ready to get large amounts of people vaccinated. So we started there. Health systems and hospitals have been vaccinating their in groups. Initially, we set out groups. Right now, because of just logistics, we want to see everyone in 1A phase. So I'm not going to go a ton into groups, but basically, we had group 1 was those who are in direct exposure to potentially infectious fluids. This included people who worked in the hospital, urgent care, so on and so forth. And that also included folks in long-term care. Group 2 is residential care and other congregate settings. And that we wanted to be broad. This includes behavioral health in our definition, substance use disorder. Group 3 was day treatment facilities and outpatients folks. And then group 4 was public health, early learning. And this word always strikes me a little, death care workers, but that means people who are, our medical examiners or other folks who are working with bodies after they have passed. And what we've really learned in the actual practical application of getting these vaccines out, and once again, those things were based on equity and based on risk and based on a variety of things. You may have heard some stories that, well, this group has been vaccinated before this group. And really one of the learnings for us is that because of there's the policy around prioritizing vaccine, and then there's what it takes to get it out. And so we've really been asked by partners and local public health authorities and other folks to have flexibility within these groups. We want to make sure that no vaccine goes to waste. We want to make sure that people, if there's a health system that has vaccine, that they're able to vaccinate their employees without that, once again, without that vaccine going to waste. So we are at this point vaccinating across the state. There's vaccines across, every part of the state. Our local public health authorities, every county is being allocated vaccine and is working to figure out how to get this vaccine out within this 1A population. I'm guessing maybe there's another slide, but I should probably pause there and see if there are questions before talking about some of the next phases.
Rachel, this is Muriel from Crook County. And the one thing I would say that's been really helpful in this is that when you're a smaller county, you actually can do many of these groups concurrently. And so when the rules were changed, so we could actually, start with the ones at the top and our first responders and all of that, but then be able to kind of do groups at the same time, that really helped us because you do have to go kind of in groups of 10 and you do not want to waste one dose. So you have to, it's really a logistical craziness on how you have to schedule the vaccine. So I do think that would be one thing I would say would be important as we move forward. And even if we have other groups that are in different, 1B, but having some ability to be able to kind of work on those groups at the same time is really helpful.
Yeah, thank you for that, Mariel. It's really good to get that practical perspective because I know that this conversation brings up a lot of values and emotions for people, and sometimes it's hard to understand. Well, wait a minute, why would this go before this? And there are a lot of technical considerations that come in. So I appreciate you sharing that perspective, and I appreciated that we listened to the word in the field and what people are experiencing and been able to flex and make changes. And ultimately, I think that's what being responsive looks like.
I have a question about distribution and the logistics of distribution. Was it on the onus of like these long-term care facilities and hospitals to outreach to OHA to get that, or did OHA outreach to the organizations? Because I do think that speaks to equity.
Yeah, thank you for that question. And it just reminded me that I left out an important piece. That part of the distribution, the OHA has pushed. We're in a what's called a push model, so we're pushing vaccine out. And part of it is through a federal partnership directly with pharmacies, so CVS, Walgreens, and Consensus, and the federal government. And so the vaccine allocations that have went to our long-term care facilities, et cetera, skilled nursing are going throughout that course, are being delivered by pharmacies in direct partnership with the federal government. So what we've done is allocated some of our doses to them to distribute. Once again, that's happening across the state geographically, which was one of our considerations for equity. So initially the distribution was going, OHA is working with providers for distribution. Our goal is to enroll and have enrolled providers that are, providers of flu vaccines and other things, and then allocating doses based on a number of factors. That includes how many healthcare workers there are in that county. It includes how many healthcare workers, healthcare personnel, once again, that broad definition that an entity or a health system has themselves, or how many staff and residents there are in long-term care facilities.
Looks like Leslie, you have a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, I put some of this in the chat, but I've really appreciated the partnership that the Oregon Health Authority has offered the developmental disability community, as many of the OHA documents start with. In some of the prep materials we had to read for today, you see that the data regarding the outcomes of people experiencing intellectual or developmental disabilities are very stark compared to other populations. And we have appreciated the focus that the Oregon Health Authority has given this important group of Oregonians. One of the things I'm a little bit concerned about is every time I hear from the Oregon Health Authority in slides like this, I don't see people with developmental disabilities, even though I know, based on information that OHA has given us, that most people with developmental disabilities, along with paid and unpaid staff and supporters for them, would fall under group 3. But we don't have that in writing here. And I think it's confusing for people on the ground to know where they fit. People with developmental disabilities, we have close to 31,000 in Oregon, all across Oregon. And right now, that partnership, Kristen, that they were discussing with pharmacies, that's only reaching about 6,000. We have 25,000 other people experiencing intellectual and developmental disabilities included in phase 1A that have absolutely no idea how that vaccine is going to come to them. And it's truly a matter of life and death, just like it is for so many other groups. But I just want to put out there that it would be very helpful if OHA could do a more detailed, deep dive into exactly who is involved in these groups, and also let public health authorities know that people experiencing developmental disabilities and their families and their caregivers are part of phase 1A, and that they need to coordinate with the local case management entities in the area. I'm very concerned that we're going to move on to phase 1B and C and 2 and leave out a population because we never figured out how to get it to them, because they're not readily available as hospital staff or something like that. These people, we know that our communities are best when everyone lives in communities in Oregon, and that's where people with developmental disabilities live, and it takes a little bit more work and connection to be able to make that happen. So I hope we can fix that, but I also hope we can use that experience to realize that our work today needs to be making sure that the groups that come after phase 1B or phase 1A can go more smoothly. It's false hope to say you can get a vaccine and not be able to give it to you. So thanks.
Leslie, this is Mira. Oh, sorry, Rachel. I was just going to give you an example of right now I'm working with some individuals in Crook County to get names and find out individuals so we can reach out and get those individuals vaccinated. We have a lot more granularity at the local level of what all these different groups are. And so many of us have created kind of a table, and it's like we're going down that table and we're reaching out. So just know that many of us at the local health, on the local health side, are reaching out to those groups.
That's great. Thank you. It would be helpful too when people with developmental disabilities can get that information as well. So I know it's happening in lots of great places and there's good work being done, but it's a challenge right now. So I hope we can use this experience to inform so other groups don't have the same experience of that feeling of false hope.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I saw that Shimi put some stuff in the chat, and we can get out more specific information and definitely noted in terms of using language where folks understand that they're included. I would say just in terms of the group 1A, kind of to round this out, if there's not any other questions. So there's basically 3 parts to group 1A in terms of how the distribution happens. There's the OHA pushes to health systems part that we talked about. There's the federal pharmacy partnership that happens where the federal government is giving vaccines or working with pharmacies to push out to long-term care. And then there's the tribal communities, and this happens in a couple of different ways. Some tribal communities are working directly with the federal government to get vaccines. This is included in 1A. And then some of our tribes in Oregon are working with OHA to get those vaccines where we allocate. So in effect, there's 3 parts there, and in the with the tribal communities, they're vaccinating and have been vaccinating as well. And there are folks on the call who could tell you much more about it in specific detail. But I just wanted to summarize for folks. There's kind of 3 actual, to Kristen's question, there's 3 mechanisms or pathways, if you will, and there's technically a variety of groups. At this point, we're wanting to get vaccine to everyone in that group and working with a variety of partners to do that. And as you all have raised, it's definitely a learning in there, and I'm not going to, in the name of transparency, I'm not going to lie, there's a lot of logistics and there's a lot of partners, which is great, and it's also challenging. And I know that some communities out there want, vaccine much faster, and we're working to ramp up as quickly as we can.
Deborah, you have your hand raised. Go ahead.
Tribal communities, I would like to insert a priority for people who are language speakers, people who know and speak the language, traditional language, because when we lose speakers, we're losing a lot more of our our culture. Also, carriers of traditional knowledge. Traditional knowledge could be people who know about the foods and medicines, our traditional foods and medicines that are very important to our culture. So carriers of traditional knowledge of other things, our culture, people who perform ceremonies, and people who know the language and the songs. It's very important to continue our culture and our heritage. So I just wanted to interject that priority as language and traditional knowledge. People carry traditional knowledge.
I can confirm that those people you just mentioned are definitely being identified and put in the planning for a lot of the tribal planning that I've seen, not from just the state of Oregon, but other states. So thank you for that. As a tribe that has received vaccines and has already started immunizing people, we were able to kind of do what we want with them. We did follow the phase 1A recommendations and went with our healthcare workers. But when you get 100 vaccines and you have to use 10 of them within 6 hours, if we were to follow the group recommendations, we would either be losing vaccines or, waiting to immunize our dental staff until we got the go-ahead. So, while I appreciate the the guidance with the groups in a way in rural communities or people with smaller groups of people to immunize within groups, it could potentially cause problems and cause a loss of vaccine if we are required to wait before we move through each group. So I just would like to keep that as a consideration when we talk about phase 1B and C and 2, that if we're going to include groups, I think we need the ability of certain areas to make their own decisions within those.
Thank you, and I would like to add on to that just a little bit more. As the group I represent along the Columbia River, they're not close to an Indian Health Center either way, Warm Springs or Yakima. It's 2 hours, two to 3 hour drive. This group has experienced much inequity in services, all kinds of services, especially health. So the group I represent living along the Columbia River, they're a group that is not seen by anybody or heard by anyone. So they will be the last to receive anything, even in regular services. COVID has only, I guess, brought to the forefront how much inequity they experience in receiving all kinds of services, and especially health. They are the last because they're not living on the reservation. They're living on the river in loose sites without adequate water or sanitation. So it brings them at a higher risk for COVID. So I just want to point that out to this group, that they already experience inequity in healthcare. And so they're not identified, or they might be counted in a reservation count, but they don't live there. So I just kind of wanted to point that out. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. And also, I want to check in with folks. We are at about 11:15. This is a really worthy conversation, and we want to answer your questions about just the sequencing of 1A. I want to give folks opportunity to also let you folks know questions, and there's a lot of going on in the chat right now. So if there are additional questions there, our staff will try to answer that. We probably have time for maybe one more question for Rachel before we want to kind of transition into the next piece that we want to offer you this morning.
No?
Yes, please.
This is, my apologies to interject, from kind of an accessibility and communication perspective. I would put forth as an opportunity to this group to acknowledge that co-conversations are challenging to follow. If there's a conversation in the chat versus on the Zoom. Yeah. I don't have an answer for that, but I would like to offer that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for acknowledging that. There were a couple questions that were raised in the beginning of the chat that I would like, Shimmy, if you can address. I know that Kelly had a couple questions that you were trying to answer. If you can address a couple of those for us as we transition into the next piece.
Certainly. Do you want me to wait until we get to those slides?
No, go. I'd
Just
like
go
you
ahead
to
and...
actually, the questions that Kelly posed in the chat, and you had had a couple responses, and then there were a couple others. If you don't mind reading her question and then offering your answer. Just so I want to make sure we circle back on a couple of those. I know we don't have time to go through all of that, and I apologize. I'll be thinking of ways to kind of how we can engage all of that so that there's, I don't want folks to miss every piece, right? And so please, if you could go through a couple of those that you answered.
Okay. Yeah, I only got to answer one. Hold on. I'm just scrolling back up just to get the first question. So, Kelly's question was, do the groups currently in phase 1A include incarcerated and houseless folks? And I answered that question to say that actually they are not included in phase 1A. So we will be co-creating that sequencing with this group here for phase 1B, 1C, or 2. Leslie asked, while I appreciate the focus on healthcare workers.
One thing to that, Shimmy,
yeah.
And for adults in custody and whatnot, we have been having conversations as well with the Department of Corrections and wanted to bring to you all, and I think they've has been working through a statement, and we can get the formal statement. I'm not going to get the language right off the top of my head. About really them being in 1B. So that's one of the things as we get there that we want this group to have consideration of where in sequencing those folks in custody would be in 1B.
Okay, so that's already been determined, Rachel? The 1B?
That's the ask. That's the ask of the group to
okay.
consider those folks in 1B. And we can talk more about kind of their risk and some of the reasoning behind just in that congregate care setting. But I think that that's an important data point that we'd like folks to consider.
Okay, yeah, that said, I think the house list is also another missing piece that we should be considering. The next question is from Leslie. Let me try to get, well, I think I answered Leslie's question with a link that wasn't working, so I'm gonna get that out in an email. Let's see. George says it will be easier to navigate and fulfill these criteria once we have more vaccine in hand. That is true. We're hoping that the federal supply of the vaccine will go up, whereby we can meet that with our operational logistical plans. Marin Ariola says, what about including community-based organizations and staff that are working in the front lines with COVID-19 patients and doing testing events? Rachel, perhaps you could answer that if this group would be considered as part of group for other public health workers, even though they're not actually employed by a public health setting.
Can you say that one more time?
Oh, community-based organizations and their staff who are working in the front lines with COVID-19 patients and doing their testing events?
Yeah, so folks who are, and that's in the guidance that anyone who's delivering vaccines would be vaccinated as well.
What about those doing testing events or not employed by traditional healthcare settings?
Yeah, definitely, I think the testing events, we would need to dig down a little bit into what that is specifically, so I don't want to give a blanket answer there, but happy to follow up with folks on specific consultation on that one. And in terms of people not employed by traditional healthcare workers, that's really why or health systems, that's why we wanted to have a broad definition. So it's not just solely tied to who employs you, but it's more about the risk and the type of work that's being done.
Okay, cool. Safina Qureshi appreciates the removing of grouping of 1A and then appreciates that OHA heard the input and made that change. Kelly asks again, can you speak, Rachel, about how the distribution phases centers on BIPOC equity and how that centering is also being honored at county levels in the state? And question to Rachel or others, I wonder how that translates to natives in urban settings regarding Julie's comment about phase 1A, including tribal communities.
Great, thank you. Rachel, do you want to comment on that real quick? And I'm going to ask that we wrap this piece up.
Sure. A couple of the ways that we really wanted to center on BIPOC and tribal communities, so Black, Indigenous, and people of color, is to make sure that we had a broad definition of healthcare personnel, to understand that there are many people who are working in a healthcare setting or on behalf of or taking care of people who, if we just used a definition of a licensed provider or just started, with those who might be working in an ICU, would be left out. And so that's part of the way that this phase 1A is really centering on including all of the people who are in those settings, as well as making sure that we had a broad definition of traditional health workers. I really appreciated the comments around language and really broadening our understanding of what traditional healers are. And so that's another way that we really wanted to center is not having a very narrow definition, and knowing that through this we would hear more and more people who are working as healers, as caretakers in our community, and we wanted to have as broad of a definition as possible. That said, I understand that means that then there are a lot of folks who may not be associated with health systems formally that need to get vaccinated, and that's some of our work in identifying folks and working with counties to, as Muriel and other folks said, to identify who, what BIPOC folks and other folks who may not be officially linked to health systems, who they are and how to set up venues for them, those to be vaccinated. So we are working currently with health systems and our local public health authorities to really broaden the net in 1A so that we can get more folks vaccinated.
Great, thank you.
Can I just want to say one thing. I think that the health systems is great, but there's a lot, and you said it right now, Rachel, there's a lot of people that are doing home health who are caregivers who are actually in the low income category and are working and are not getting and are not being seen. And so how do we get to those people? And I know that the state hires them. So does the state have a list? I mean, there's so many questions that I have about the people that are working that are out there and not getting the vaccine, you know, and are not being seen because they're in the house and out, and then they go back to a home that's full of people, so they're going to get something. So I think that we need to sort of figure out, how do you get to those caregivers that are out there in with the elders, right? And so now you have people that are at home that are being taken care of by caregivers that are not getting the vaccine. So it's just being spread around. And I think and I'm glad you talked a little bit about that, but I think the state might have it. I mean, somebody's paying them. So somebody has their names. And so we need to figure that out, because those people are passing it along to other people. So, and then we have the essential workers, and we have other people that are just are invisible right now, right? And we need to get to them, you know, because they're not going to get the vaccine if we can't figure this out. So I just feel frustrated that that I know that we have a system, but the system is not getting to the people that are actually doing the work, you know, up front, that are getting exposed every day. So I just need to just voice that.
Thank you, Maria. I'm going to ask, we have two more, I have two more folks who would like to get in on this, both Ruth and Christine. I'll take Ruth first, then Christine. Both had their hands raised, and then I'd like to take a pause after that. So Ruth, please.
Yes, thank you. We've been working a lot with OHA and Department of Human Services, and really appreciate the partnership on the rollout of the vaccine in groups 1A. There's been a lot of questions that I'm getting where some of the elders that are not in the licensed settings fall in terms of group 1, whether they fall in 1A or they fall into another group. So I think some greater clarity around what's in 1A in the congregate care settings would be really helpful. And an example I would bring are a lot of elders live in congregate settings that are not assisted living, that are not nursing, very high vulnerable folks, low-income subsidized housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. Christine?
Yes. I appreciate everything everyone was saying. I was listening, but I wanted to take time for specifically OHA to acknowledge that you're trying and you're doing your best. And I just want to be one of those people to say thank you for that. It's not a perfect system. A lot of our people we're representing in communities are missing out right now, but I am hopeful that this committee will work it out. And I just didn't want you to be bombarded with what we need as much as acknowledging what you have done so far.
Thank you, Christine. That really, thank you for that. That means a lot. I want to take a pause for a second with our question and answer period with Rachel, and thank you so much for answering our questions that we have. And I know we have a lot more. We are at that 11:27 mark, and I want to give folks an opportunity to do a quick stretch break and ask this group. I know we have a lot to cover and we had a full agenda, but I also want to give space to flexibility in moving forward, because I know we want to ground folks into the information. Do we want to take a quick 5-minute? Does that sound okay with folks, so that we can push on for the rest half hour? Does that sound okay as opposed to 10? Yes? Okay, thank you for the thumbs up. Well, let's take 5 minutes and let's get back. How about 11:35? Let's do 11:35. That's easier for me to remember. So 11:35, if we can reconvene, and we'll jump right back in it. Thank you so much. Framing the work that we've been doing in OHA around equity and values, and how decisions have been made and for the sequencing piece. I do want to acknowledge that we are running very tight on time today, and so we will kind of after Rachel finishes her portion, I would like to check in with the group and to see one how we're feeling about additional work. As we can see, there's a lot of information that we want to not only provide for you, but give you that grounding in the work. And so how do we feel about additional meetings? That doesn't have to be decided today. And so my suggestion would be that OHA staff will reach out to folks sometime in the next day or two to figure out, can we land on additional timing, and what's the sense of the group? And so we'll do that as one of our to-dos on our end, and for you to all give you a time to think about that. And so right now what I'd like to do is turn it back to Rachel. If there was any pieces, Rachel, you want to continue to frame for the group around sequencing.
Yeah, thank you. I would just say a couple of other things as it relates to 1B and 1C and beyond. So ultimately the charge of the group is to make determinations for the next phases, including 1B, 1C2 and beyond. And there's a couple of things that have happened in terms of 1B that I just want to put out there and be really transparent about. One is, you may have heard Governor Brown announced, I guess it was last month or last year actually, I guess now, really wanting to see staff and educators in 1B, and that they would be the first up in 1B. So that includes, really 0 to 12th grade. That includes educators broadly as well, folks in the education setting, as well as those in the early learning setting. So that we know kind of off the top. And then the other piece, which I talked a bit about, is adults in custody. And so the context behind that is that the Oregon Department of Justice, on behalf of the Oregon Department of Corrections, is litigating a class action lawsuit on behalf of over 300 adults in custody regarding the conditions in prison due to COVID-19. And one of to avoid that litigation, one of the agreements that was made was that adults in custody, and that includes youth in custody who are eligible for the vaccine, so 16 and up, would be included in phase 1B of the allocation process. And that's where you all are making decisions. So once again, I just wanted to be really upfront and clear about those decision points that had been made. And so that's staff and educators. The governor leadership and direction is really to get those next and top of the list in 1B, and then that adults in custody are also included in 1B. And that adults in custody is those things are consistent with the Centers for Disease Control's recommendation. But we just wanted to state that up top, and we'll have more conversations as we move through and what the next phases look like. And I will stop there, New. I know that there are other things that folks want to do, and we can take questions offline or follow up in other ways. If people have questions, I'm happy to.
Wait, Rachel, you said 60 and up? I thought the age was 65. Did I mishear you?
Yeah, I didn't mean to say 60 and up or give an age group. Hopefully the number that I gave was more around the amount of adults in custody that were involved in the class action litigation suits. But the CDC has talked about 65 and up, and it might actually be 75 and up in their latest iteration for 1B.
Great, thank you, Rachel. Okay, so for our next topic, we do have some more grounding information. Specifically, we had presentations from Dr. Shimi Sharif and Dr. Dean Seidlinger, and unfortunately Dean had to come out of this meeting. We do know that those two pieces would be a nice grounding place for folks as far as knowing and understanding more about the ACIP recommendations, which is the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practice standards set forth by the CDC, and then also COVID-19 immunization and data uptake from here in Oregon. So those two are on, I don't want to say on hold. We can do it in several different ways. That's what we have to get through today. And then also quickly thinking about kind of committee business as far as communication is really important, because these are public meetings. We need to think about whether we will have additional meetings so that we can set up the appropriate time frame to make the announcement that the meetings are available to the public. And so I want to kind of give space to folks thinking about our governance process as well, thinking about do we want to select a committee chair? How would you folks want to proceed as we review the charter? So there's some really practical things that we need to be thinking about in the next few minutes that we have left here. And I say few, we have about 15 minutes left, and these things do take some time to process. And so if we can first, I want to ask the group, do we feel that piece of yes, we want to consider meeting more than once a week for 2 hours for the next 5 weeks?
Hi, Nu. It's Marin.
Yeah.
I looking at the agenda, I guess we didn't do a whole lot in terms of the other materials or the PowerPoint. So I'm assuming we're going to need more and more meetings. It seems like we get in deeper in conversation, and that takes quite a bit of time.
Yes.
So I would recommend additional meetings if we could do that. I think it'd be great.
Okay. Thank you, Marin. Yes, and we really want to, and again, it goes back to that tension of giving you all some time and space to kind of soak in this information as well. You know, we've been sitting with it for a couple weeks at least, right? And so for you all, it would be not fair to ask you to make so many decisions in such a quick pace. Right. And yet we also know the tension to do this work efficiently too is important.
Hi, this is Malika. I'm totally okay with doing extra meetings. However, I caution them being during work hours. I still have a lot of stuff to get done. And so if we're going to do the extra meetings, could they be outside of work hours, maybe on the weekends? I'm not for sure. I'm committed to the process, but I do have priorities at work that I have to tend to.
I think I echo what Malika. Yeah.
This is Muse. I also agree with what Malika said. I'm same situation. I'm considered, I have a regular full-time day work. So it's, if you can do it after hours or weekends would be great. But during weekdays, it's going to be difficult for me to participate more than one a week. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Muse. Thank you, Suring. And Malika, thank you for bringing that up as well.
Can you put up a poll or something that we can sort of check off what we could do? I think weekends or evenings would be great. That because we all have our jobs, and I think that would help at least to ground us better, because we do have a lot of discussions that we can get to your presentations.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Maria. And Dolores, I saw that as well from you. Thank you. With that, I'm going to say, yes, we can work on trying to figure out another time that works best for the majority of this group. We'll offer a couple different times and be on the lookout for that. And that would be a to-do for us here, OHA staff. And I'm kind of saying it out loud so somebody records that and gets that down. Also, as far as, you know, we sent out a lot of information for you with regards to the charter review, which we didn't get to today. I'm wondering, if it's all right, Shimi, we have about 15 more minutes. Is it possible for you to present kind of that piece on ACIP. Does that sound appropriate to folks, that you would like to get a little more information? I feel like there's some pieces there that, again, would be additional grounding information for this group that we can get to.
Sure.
Okay.
Oh, can someone present the slides?
And as before Shimi starts, I would also encourage folks that as you come with your questions, please jot those down for us, because we can also send back information via email to you folks, because I know we'll have a lot of questions, and I know we won't have the full amount of time to engage in the conversation fully, but I want for OHA staff to be prepared to also offer that information to you, if not today, then in subsequent meetings too. Thank you. Go ahead, Shimi.
So again, this is like Rachel just clarified in the chat. So these are just broad recommendations made by the CDC as part of their ACIP committee. The VAC, as it stands now, is not bound by the principles and the outlined proposed sequencing that's presented by the CDC, but perhaps it'll give you some background to the types of ethical frameworks they're considering in making these recommendations. Next slide. So the federal vaccination allocation process, so the federal government has pre-purchased several doses of both Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, and it will continue to purchase other vaccines as they come on the market. So these vaccines were authorized for emergency use, but not fully approved by the FDA in December of 2020. It is the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices that provides advice directly to the director of the CDC regarding on use of vaccines, and this goes beyond the COVID-19 vaccines. All vaccines have to be vetted by this committee. Next slide. So for phase 1, the CDC outlined broad groups, which they balance 2 ethical principles to come up with these groups, and that's outlined a little bit further in the next slide. So one is who's harmed most by this virus, and that actually determines how likely they are to get sick or potentially die from this virus. The other piece that the CDC weighed in outlining these groups is how do you keep society moving and be able to handle like the surge and kind of the rampage with which this virus is going through our communities in a way that we don't totally collapse. So that's the rationale by which the first 2 groups for phase 1A that we just outlined were selected to be adults in long-term care facilities, mostly of older age, and also those workers that actually help keep society moving and help deal with this illness and death that comes with COVID-19. So that's high. And so what you see is there's definitely overlap between these groups. They're not mutually exclusive. That's shown by the overlapping circles in this diagram. And that's really weighing those 2 ethical principles to make sure that the most fair distribution process happens while this virus remains a scarce resource. Next slide. So with that, sorry for this confusing slide. If you think about it as we go further in the vaccine process on the left axis, as opposed to time on the bottom axis. So we started with phase 1A, which again, like I said, healthcare providers in a broad interpretation of that term, along with long-term care facility residents. And with that, we would move into phase 1B based on this proposed guidance from the CDC, which again weighs these 2 groups the same way. So essential workers, meaning workers, essential, and you can think of it very broadly, people working in grocery stores, people working in public transportation and others, weighed along with adults over age 75 as these 2 groups where we need to keep society moving and also just be really mindful of where the vaccine is going to have the biggest impact because of where illness and death from COVID-19 is hitting people hardest. And then moving into phase 1C, again, we're grabbing groups that haven't already been captured in groups 1A and 1B. So again, that would be adults with high-risk medical conditions and also any essential workers that haven't been captured in group 1B. So this was actually outlined in a little bit more granular fashion more recently by the ACIP in the middle of December, and that's actually outlined in the next slide. Next. So I'm really sorry about this really confusing slide, but the reason we left this in is because it kind of outlines all of the phases, even though it's in shades of blue. To those who are colorblind, I really apologize. I'm going to like name them so that you can see if perhaps you can't even see the color blue. So healthcare providers and long-term care facilities were captured in phase 1A. We move into phase 1B, which captures frontline essential workers as well as those over 75. And then phase 1C captures all other essential workers not considered frontline, and then those from ages 65 to 74, as well as those under the age of 64, but those who live with other high-risk medical conditions that pose them the same risk as advanced age can. Finally, phase 2 captures all those not captured in phase 1A, 1B, or 1C, and that's those people over age 16 without any high-risk medical conditions. With this, I have to clarify, under emergency authorization, both sets of vaccines are actually only eligible in adults over the age of 16 for Pfizer and 18 for Moderna. Children at this time are not authorized to receive the vaccine under the terms of the EUA. This could certainly change when we get to full approval. Next slide. Oh.
Shimmy, I see several questions in the chat that are about essential workers. Oregon does not define essential workers. How will we handle this? What categories are essential workers? Do you have a list?
So yeah, so we do have a slide about this too. So we do grant that Oregon has intentionally decided not to define essential workers, especially as it relates to reopening. So that was an intentional move by our state government. But we do have the list of federal definitions of what essential workers are, and this was outlined by Critical Infrastructure Workers as a trade organization. So this is a starting place by which we can start. But that said, again, you know, the definition of who a frontline essential worker is and all other essential workers is up to the VAC to weigh in on and decide, because these definitions are broad labor-based definitions. They don't necessarily reflect the kinds of work that people are doing, paid or unpaid, with communities every day. I got one more question from Dr. Goldwau. These are not categories that are currently in the OHA COVID-19 dashboard. Will we be providing public data as to how many healthcare personnel and essential workers are vaccinated? Also, these categories overlap. Example, essential workers over the age of 65. Will we have that data as well? I think we are capturing that data in our, at least by age and demographics in our alert system. Rachel or Kara, do you know what other granular data we are capturing besides what's being recorded on alert?
I think that's a question we'll need to look into. And I guess that's one thing we can come back to the group with what's captured in alert. And then I think it would raise another question about, because it's not going to capture everything that folks would want to know. So I think then we'll have to have a conversation of what does that mean, and are there ways for us to build out our understanding of who's being vaccinated with supplemental or other data.
And this is Jamila. I got a private message from a VAC member wanting to state for the notes that this is not an equity or anti-colonial plan. And we would like, this person would like that named for the notes.
Agree. So again, these are broad CDC recommendations. They're coming from very traditional, previously not necessarily inclusive approaches to vaccine distribution. So this again is why these are just outlines, considerations that you can use if you want to or need to, but you are definitely not bound by these sequencing recommendations in any way.
Shimi, this is new. Thank you so much. I'm going to have you pause right there. And I want to apologize to the group that I had pushed this forward too fast in the sense of just time. And so my apologies to the group because I know there's a lot of questions and I was very time focused in my doing so, and so I apologize for that. And so I do want to recognize that we are coming up to 5 minutes before we need to end, and so I want to make sure that folks give the floor back to you to one, possibly ask a couple questions of Dr. Sharif, and then also as we move forward, any final thoughts about where we want to go in processing piece. And Muriel, I see that you have your hand raised, so I'm going to go there first.
Okay, just a quick question. On some of the questions that were asked last time about sort of where do they work and that type of thing, that's not, I think what would be helpful is we had to come up with our own administration form at the local level to do that, which is one that we've used for flu and other types of things. But there's not I don't think, except I sent it out to everybody, I don't think there's a standard. So if we want to collect data, we've got to at least have on the administration document that we're having the client fill out, we've got to add those types of things.
Excuse me, this is Nanette speaking. I thought the information that we were using was from Alert, and that was a standardized system database that did not capture all of the information that we wanted. So are you saying creating another database that would capture all of that for the state of Oregon in conjunction?
Were you asking Muriel?
I think so, Muriel.
Yeah, no, I mean, we are using Alert. I'm just saying that we may be able to, I don't know if we'd be able to upload it or do something somewhere else. If we want to collect that data, we have to have another way of doing it. And I know even with the Real D or anything like that, I mean, there's some things on that form, but a lot isn't. So I know Kara and I were talking about this, even the idea that we have to have people wait for 15 minutes afterwards. And we thought of even having them fill out another survey or fill out a survey afterwards. We might be able to capture more information, but that would be information that there's not a database for it. We just have to figure out what to do with it, unless there was something created online.
Thank you.
I have just a general note that I feel like I'm kind of on repeat on, but I'm still hoping that at some point, and I know time got away from us today, that we're going to have a general conversation about the vaccine itself and and us all be on the same page on that. Because even as we're talking about this and knowing what we're going to be charged with and, identifying the groups for 1B and 1C, I personally don't have a clear understanding enough on the vaccine itself to make some of these decisions as far as, firefighters who share physical space. Does everybody have to have the vaccine for it to be most effective versus an older adult living at home by themselves? So when we're thinking about groups that it's going to benefit the most in addition to this equity lens, I think there's still an elephant in the room of us all being on the same page on the vaccine itself and how it would be most efficiently used.
Thank you, Kristen. And yes, we will definitely have vaccine science, if you will, as part of the grounding for everyone. We understand that not everybody has a public health background or science background. And so we want to make sure that you feel that you have the knowledge that you need to have to go forward to make decisions. So yes, thank you. We will have that. I would like to suggest that because we didn't get into the piece about committee business and governance, I would ask that for the next meeting, we will not only complete the rest of what we have, but I would ask that the Vaccine Advisory Committee members put forward topics that they feel that would help them to make feel like they've made the next pit stop, if you will, on our road trip, right? And so if you want to send that, I encourage you to send that to Jamila Norton, who sends out the Vaccine Advisory Committee meeting Zoom appointments. And so if I could ask that of the vaccine group, that will help staff be able to figure out where you all are at, and be ready to give you some additional information as we move the work forward. Does that sound okay?
New, I guess one.
I'm confused.
Sorry, Christine, I think I interrupted you.
No, it's okay. I'm just, I just need clarity of when and how you are wanting this information.
Yes, if you can send Jamila Norton an email, just let her know if you have a topic that you feel like this would help move the Vaccine Advisory Committee to another important part in our process. That would be super helpful. Shimmy, were you going to say something?
Yeah, before we close, because people are already starting to drop off, there's operational and logistics questions that people raised in the chat that we didn't get to. How would people like to be informed of those answers? Email? Did you want us to address them in person the next time we meet?
Perhaps what my suggestion might be is we'll do a couple of ways to do it. We'll send information out via email, and then also raise up kind of like more of the frequently asked questions of this group that rose to the, I don't want to say rose to the top because everything is important, but things that were commonly asked. Does that feel okay with folks? Okay. Then it says, can we see the question raised for our consideration by the VAC members? I'm sorry, that disappeared on me.
Can we see the question raised for our consideration by the VAC members on the finger chart shown earlier? And I think the question that we did propose, the hand voting system, was for where do people sit within their own acceptance that this vaccine is, that they're endorsing or believe in this vaccine.
I heard it as, does the group agree that the COVID-19 vaccine is a positive public health intervention? I welcome edits.
Yes, I would like to see that sent to us so that we can propose any questions that we have that would help us in coming to a vote on that question. I think that's where I'm at right now.
Thank you, Nanette. I will put that in, as well as what the fist to 5 actually, which each of the numbers mean, and I will put that into our meeting minutes as things for you to consider for our next time together. I'm going to go ahead. It's 12:03. I would like to thank all of you for your patience, and as we entered into this space together this morning. I thank you so much for your time and your effort and your energy. What we'll do is our next meeting is scheduled for next week, Thursday, at 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. There will be a Zoom invite heading to your inboxes if it hasn't been sent already. And so we will work hard to gather information. Again, I encourage you to send specific topics that you would like to raise to the attention of the VAC members, and we will move forward with that. And we will also add additional information about potential future meetings for this group. So thank you again for your time, energy, and intention for this meeting this morning. Again, welcome, and we're excited to take this road trip with you. Thank you.
Thank you.